Welcome back. If you're new here, then today we're going to be talking about how yoga bridges the gap between anxiety and inner peace. Just as a pre-warning, this is not a quick fix. This is for the healing girlies that are actually putting in the work to improve their mental health and improve their well-being. So if you think it's going to be a quick fix, then you can exit the video right now. I wanted to talk about this today because of the impact that yoga has had on my life. I will get into the story, but essentially it's just brought me back to feeling like myself again, feeling confident in my body, confident in expressing myself freely, and just opening me up from the shell that I once was from experiencing being depressed and anxious. I began my healing journey around 2019. As soon as I found out that yoga and meditation were going to be the solutions to my never-ending anxiety, I see myself as quite a dedicated person. So as soon as I found that out, I meditated on the Headspace app for over 365 days. I have a screenshot, which if I find it, I'll put it on the screen now. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of resistance that I experienced when I did this. And some days I would feel I wasn't seeing any results, or some days I feel like I would sit down to meditate and I would literally just, like, my thoughts would just carry me away and I wouldn't be present for any of the meditation. But it's just the act of sitting down and being consistent that got me to a place of even understanding what I should actually be doing. Around a year later, when I started to feel like myself again, I decided to become a yoga teacher because we were also locked down in the UK. And I knew that yoga had the power to heal me and the power to heal others as well. So it just instantly made me interested in teaching because I've always enjoyed helping people. On the days I didn't feel like sitting down to meditate, I felt like maybe I had too much energy or I just felt uncomfortable sitting there. This is when I used yoga because it was just something to move my body, move the energy. I started to make a habit of stretching before and after jiu-jitsu class because it would calm me down after training and it would just make me more flexible. It would release the tension in my body that I was feeling and also help with the sore muscles after training. I then started teaching classes in England. I realized that not many people know the benefits to practicing yoga, but sometimes that's not enough to influence someone. I've said on one of my other videos that my mental health was at a point where it was so bad that I was just determined to improve it, and having an interest in psychology from college, I knew that this was something that I could change. And as soon as I'd been to therapy, been on medication, at the point where no matter what, because all of the self-help books told me that meditation and yoga were the solution to how bad I was actually feeling, that's why I was so determined. It didn't matter about motivation. People really struggle sometimes, but I was really not feeling great and I just wanted to get myself out of that place, and that's where my motivation comes from, essentially. I think if your mental health isn't so bad and you're kind of just comfortable, then that's why you're not motivated towards, because the pain isn't significant enough to create that motivation. So for most people, if you are kind of mentally sound, then there's no real reason to practice yoga because you feel comfortable. But that wasn't the case for me. So maybe you know the benefits to yoga, or you are practicing but you're not really seeing any real results. And that's why I wanted to speak today, whilst also influencing people to start, but also helping those that are already practicing. And more recently, I said in one of my Instagram posts about how focusing on the breath and being more conscious of the movement of your body throughout practice, instead of, maybe a lot of the time in class, listening to the instructor and just doing the movements like unconsciously, or maybe you're rushing through your yoga class because you've got somewhere to be afterwards. Like, these are the things that really don't really take us out of our practice. And I think being more conscious within our practice and not just seeing it as something on your to-do list is going to then facilitate more transformation and better results. So going into the actual yoga practice and how that can get you away from your anxiety and living in your head and towards living in your body and creating that inner peace. As I've just mentioned, breath work is important. We use the breath to inhale and exhale with each and every movement. So not only are we focusing on like the sensation in our body when we do use breath work, but we're also concentrating on the movement when we do the breath. So that in turn is bringing us back to the present moment. Instead of being up in our heads, we're thinking about the sensations in our body. If we're particularly thinking about our inhale, our exhale, and in the positioning of our body in relation to when we're doing that. So the combination of those two is something that brings our attention back to the body rather than being up in our head and our thoughts and feelings. And throughout your yoga practice, you should also be witnessing where you can feel physical tension, and maybe there's some resistance or discomfort that comes up. So it's important to know specific areas of your body where you feel that tension. Like for me in particular, it was in my hips. I know that this still feels like there's some tension in my shoulders. However, my shoulders have significantly improved since 2019, since I began my healing journey. I think purely from expressing my emotions and just practicing yoga this whole time. But it's a continuous journey. So throughout your yoga practice, it's important to identify the areas where you feel tight and just working on a specific area of the body. Then this also allows to be aware of the physical sensations in our body. I actually had an injury in my right shoulder blade, and I think it was from repetitive strain and weakness from doing pole dancing and going upside down when I didn't actually have the strength to be doing that. Just ignore this pain. It's like a niggle, and it's like you ignore that pain. Your body knows it's there, but your mind's ignoring it. So it's like, I think that's tiring in my opinion, or it was tiring for me, that's for sure. Uncomfortable, essentially. So it's witnessing in your body, and not everyone's going to be different, where in your body feels tight, because you're carrying that tension around in your body on a daily basis. Like my body was just, my shoulders were up to my ears. I was constantly tense, and I was always like this because I was worrying in my head and thinking the worst case scenario about things happening. Breath work, concentrating on the movement of the body, witnessing where you feel tension in the body, and trying to work on those areas using the breath and movement to gain flexibility and release the tension from those areas. Like for example, say you are working on your hips and they're particularly tight and it's causing some discomfort, you can notice the thoughts that start to come up in your head when you do feel discomfort. It's not the aim in yoga to really push yourself to the point where you want to get out of the posture and it's super painful, but there is always going to be mild discomfort, and it's all about witnessing the mind when it comes up, when it's telling you to get out of the posture. Of course, you don't want to sit in a posture that you actually have pain in. You've got to reach a point where you just feel mild discomfort. So it's not by force, it's a balance of not being too easy but not being too hard. So you've got to hit the sweet spot in terms of managing your growth. But in reality, you don't even think about that. You just turn up to your mat because you know that you're doing it because you have standards for yourself, you love yourself, and you turn up for the mat for yourself, essentially. The same as when people try to lose fat for fat loss and they don't actually do it because they have their own best interests at heart. They do it because they want validation from how their body looks from the outside. It's the same thing. It's like getting handstands might be cool. I'm nearly there, but my shoulders are tight. It's never really about that. It's about how I feel and the fact that I don't feel good when I don't really turn up to my mat or I've skipped a few days of yoga. Back into the sensations of the body, back into the present moment. And then when you do that, you can observe the mental chatter that's going on in your mind. So it also creates awareness as well. Awareness of what's going on in your mind, awareness of what's going on in your body, and awareness in your surroundings. So I used to be stuck in anxiety, and I mentioned more recently on my Instagram about being in the free state where I'm literally disconnected from my thoughts mentally, and like I'm just living up in my head. So the mind and body connection was just not there for me because my body had been through stressful situations, or a number of stressful situations where it hadn't regulated itself properly. So my body was just in this tense state because it didn't have a sense of safety. So essentially my nervous system was dysregulated. Physically, I felt tension in my shoulders and all over my body, and also I lacked emotional expression. So how I felt inside was that I would just constantly be worrying, just a constant state of stress, anxiety, sadness, and I genuinely didn't know how to feel happy or joy or like peace, calm. Like it just never existed for me. So as I started practicing yoga, the space between my thoughts increased. I then became able to notice the programming that was going on inside of my body and learning to listen to the negative thoughts rather than allowing them to take control of me, essentially. So I actually did CBT the way, I think I've gave this example before, but the way that she said to me was, my thing was, I think because I had anxiety, I always wanted to control the future and know what was going to happen. So she said to me, like, what would life be like if you knew what was going to happen? Like, you would be able to predict the future and everything would just be the same and nothing would be a surprise and life would be pretty boring because you would know what's going to happen. I think that was one of the key points that made me realize that how wrapped up I was in my thoughts. In comparison to now, I'm so much more emotionally attuned to how I'm feeling and being able to control that, and also being more aware of how everything around me is making me feel. And I say stressful situations, but they don't actually need to be anything big. It just means that maybe something happened to you and it was quite emotionally reactive for you, and then you kind of didn't release the emotion. So maybe, like, for example, the Grab drivers here, I was on the bike and I know that there's a junction that comes up where people just come out because it's crazy here in Bali. But he kept looking at his phone and I was just like, my body just started to tense because I was like, he's looking at his phone and this junction's coming up and I know that people just come out straight away. So that's like an example. Like, my body just started to tense up. It can be other situations that are far more stressful, or even for a long period of time as well. If your body's stressed out for a long period of time, like, you unconsciously hold the tension in your body without like releasing it, processing it through your head, or even having the time and space and safety as well to do that is something that yoga has allowed me to do. So it doesn't have to be one big stressful situation, or it can be multiple, or for example, just not knowing how to emotionally regulate yourself, which is, I guess, something that you meant to learn from your parents. I think it's quite interesting to look back on the generations of how they were brought up and why people are brought up the way that they are. And there's no disrespect to, my parents and how they were brought up. It's just circumstantial, right? There's a history of mental health issues in my family, so it's no surprise that I was impacted by that. And just getting on to the point there where I talked about that the body needs to feel safe, and that was particularly true for me. It is so important to cultivate a safe environment where you feel like you can emotionally express and you feel safe to relax, because your healing journey can't really start unless you do feel relaxed. Because if you're constantly being stressed and overwhelmed, it's like putting a plaster on it or a band-aid, whatever you want to call it. Too much time at summer camp. It's important to actually address the root cause, essentially. Like, practice yoga and stuff, but maybe you're not getting results because you're in a stressful situation that you need to remove yourself from. So having a safe space to express and relax is fundamental for your healing journey. I can't express that enough, because that was one of the things that I first changed in my healing journey. And when I started to practice yoga and improve my mental health, I realized what in my environment wasn't making me feel good. So I moved out of a certain house and also just became aware of the people around me and who I was spending time with and who was actually adding to my life and who was draining my energy. I think it can be normalized as well to put up with certain situations. And for example, people hate their jobs a lot, and I just wasn't willing to do that. No matter how I've done it, I just wasn't willing to do that anymore. And people are taught to like hustle and to work hard and constantly be on the go and please other people and, don't be nasty, which I think people think boundaries are being nasty, when in reality you need to protect your energy, because that was a huge thing for me. I was just so drained, like physically, mentally and emotionally, that I just had enough. And I used to have anxiety attacks where like I actually felt like I was having a heart attack. Like my chest would spasm. It was horrible. Consistency is important. As a yoga teacher and a personal trainer, I always say that starting small is the best option. However, if you're a healing girly already and you're someone who is on your yoga journey, but maybe you're not seeing results, I'd highly recommend doing at least 1 hour's practice per week, or maybe even more if you can do that. Because yes, like the 10, 20, 30-minute practices are great for just building that habit and starting to get some results and just fitting it into your day where you can. But obviously, the longer your practice and the more consistent, the more results that you're going to see and the more benefit that you're going to feel, because you literally could not feel any better after an hour or two's practice. In January, shout out to Barefoot Yoga School, we were doing 2 hours of yoga practice on a morning, and oh my god, like, yeah, there's just no better feeling. I've already kind of touched on this, but yoga has allowed me to bring my attention back to the present moment rather than being disconnected and up in my head and in my thoughts, and releasing the tension that was in my body as well because of all of those stressful situations where I didn't kind of bring my body back, bring my nervous system back to that safe, relaxed state. This is where my body's just built up all of the tension inside and I've not actually just relaxed my body. So that's what yoga has allowed me to do essentially. And also tuning back into awareness. Like I wasn't even meeting my own needs. Like for example, I was kind of just going with the flow of what people expect you to do, settle down, get a house, be with a partner, have kids. But from a young age, I've always wanted to travel. I went to Ibiza by myself at age 18. I've done Camp America. I've traveled a lot with my family. I was lucky enough to do that. And more recently came over to Bali in Australia as well. And I actually had a little globe in my room when I was younger. And I don't know whether that's what has facilitated my passion for or excitement for exploring the world. Yeah, a little light up globe. I always just used to look at it before bed. Yeah, good memories. So by doing these practices, it brings more awareness to your body and to your surroundings. So then this enabled me to tune back into my body and actually check in with my body and realize what was making me feel good and what wasn't making me feel good. Hence, I moved out of the house. I started to travel more because that was what I truly wanted to do. I started actually following my desires. I did not want to bring a child into this world when I couldn't even self-regulate myself. It's just beyond me. It really is. So before I was drinking a lot of alcohol and rarely drink now. However, I actually drank on the medication that I was taking and it was not a good experience. So I decided that I needed a clear head to begin my healing journey, and it couldn't have got any better. And also I found jiu-jitsu. Enjoy jiu-jitsu far more than having a hangover. So that was a huge crutch that I depended on in my first year of training. I also used to be super restrictive, like I say about people, trying to lose fat for the validation of other people. That was me. I'm not going to lie. I go through this in one of my other videos. However, I used to be restrictive, but now I learned to intuitively eat. And yeah, I got to a point where I'd gained a lot of weight because I was emotionally eating. So there's a lot of things that I used to do, like drinking alcohol. I used to use food a lot more to make me feel better. I used to let people walk all over me. I used to put other people's needs before my own. I used to let people so essentially I wasn't meeting my needs. I was putting other people's needs before my own. I wasn't doing things that are in my best interest, like looking after my health. Sometimes I'd skip the gym, or like I said, I was doing the gym and dieting for all the wrong reasons, not to actually nourish my body and make myself feel good. I was doing it to look good and to look skinny. But also more recently, one of the things I think that's important is it's all about balance. Like it's not about pushing yourself too hard, but it's also not about doing nothing. Because I love jiu-jitsu so much and I really depended on it in the beginning of training, I actually used to train a lot and almost to the point where I'd burn out because I was going for more stability and a form of escapism really. But whereas now I feel I can depend on it less and I have more of a balance and listen to my body when it is burning out. And this was the issue before I started my healing journey. I was just so so disconnected from the sensations in my body and actually tuning into how my body was feeling, that I wasn't tuning into what actually made my body feel good and what didn't make it feel good. So now I don't restrict myself, but I'm also cautious about how much sugar I'm putting into my body, and trying to also limit my caffeine intake, because it can just create anxiety. And I feel like it's just, although I love matcha and I love coffee, sometimes I just think it's not worth it. I prefer to feel calm and feel like I'm actually in my body, because I do think caffeine actually takes you like out of your body and more like into doing mode than, yeah. And that has been my whole journey, essentially, just getting out of that mindset of constantly doing and constantly being in my thoughts and in my head, to actually being in my body and in the sensations of my body and how it's feeling. So I don't particularly restrict anymore, and I focus on the nutritional content of what I'm having, trying to reduce sugar, but also not restricting of myself with my favorite foods and carbs and things like that. And making sure that I'm training and either doing yoga, jiu-jitsu, or training weights. Because I think if you are a trained individual and you're moving your body at a decent amount, because your body is made to move, then I truly think if you're eating a balanced diet, you can't go wrong. Like, if you're not exercising and you're eating lots of processed food, why are you surprised that you're not at a desired weight, or you're not at a weight where your body's able to move well? I also used to have an anxious attachment style, so that is something that I've worked on over the years, and something that significantly helped me in my relationships, because I used to stay in relationships that were no good for me and settle for standards that are just on the floor, essentially. Because I was emotionally disconnected, I generally seeked out those that were also emotionally disconnected. And I think that, yeah, it's kind of like a mirror. People can only meet you where you're at. And I knew that there was a pattern forming in many of my relationships. So obviously yoga has allowed me to create that awareness and try and stop myself when I'm about to repeat those sorts of behaviors. As I've mentioned before, setting boundaries with people, moving out of environments that are no longer serving me. Like, for example, getting out of the UK because just do not function properly when there's no sunshine. For example, in Bali, eating good food, my skin feels so much better, my cycle is healthy, I feel healthy, and I think when you feel good in yourself, you function optimally, and I just did not feel like that in the UK. And again, just being aware of the people that you're surrounding yourself with. I mentioned a little exercise in one of my other videos where you check who the people are in your closest circle and check to see, are they a drain or are they a radiator? Like, do they give to you or do they just drain your energy? And I think you'd be quite surprised. And someone can be both at the same time as well. So I can't emphasize enough of concentrating on who does and what things as well, because I think a lot of the time when I've been on my laptop quite a lot or I've been on my phone quite a lot, this can also drain your energy. And there's times when I'm like, I need to stop with the screens, go to the beach or get outside or do another activity that isn't draining your energy, and making sure that you have this balance. So all of this is the result of creating awareness through yoga, through meditation, getting your attention away from your head and back into your body, and becoming aware of what actually makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel good. This might be common sense to the people who grew up in a healthy household and those who were taught how to emotionally self-regulate. But personally, my body didn't feel safe, and yoga has enabled me to come back to my body, to reconnect back to my body. You can't be free and open and express yourself fully if you're constantly closed and feel like something bad's going to happen, or even always stressed and on the go. So just to recap, the reason why we're here is how yoga bridges the gap between anxiety and inner peace. So by bringing our attention and awareness back to our breath and the sensations in our body, releasing that tension from the body and really concentrating on the breath and the movement and location of the body in your yoga practice is really going to help get results. If you're someone who is regularly practicing but you don't usually do an hour's practice, try and integrate an hour's practice into your week every single week so that you are seeing more benefit and more results from that hour-long or 2-hour-long practice. So the more that we bring our attention to the breath and to the body and release that tension from the body through yoga, through increasing our flexibility and mobility. We're releasing the tension from the body, which is then going to make it less likely that you will feel stressed and overwhelmed, or you'll start to become aware of what is making you stressed and overwhelmed so that you can change the situation on the external, or maybe becoming more organized so that something is not stressing you out. Maybe that means hiring someone else if you're a business owner and taking that load off yourself. I had to remove myself from an environment. Not only did I move houses when I first started my healing journey, but I've also moved away from the people and places so that I could be by myself and also travel the world, which is something that I've wanted to do for over 10 years. So this is how you're regulating your nervous system, by releasing the tension from your body and becoming aware of your surroundings and aware of your thoughts. You're able to become aware of the negative thought patterns that you're having and change them. So people might think that yoga is just sitting in pretty postures, but this is what it's actually doing, and how yoga can transfer to your everyday life as well as what you're doing on the mats and the physical benefits. I'm hosting an online girls yoga retreat where we're going to work on specific areas of the body, including the hips, the chest. We're releasing tension from those areas. When you feel closed in those areas, you're not open to express, you don't feel safe in your body. We're going to be going through yoga sequences designed to open those areas and also work on the mindset, which will create a bigger impact. This retreat is going to allow you to feel more energized, to start putting yourself first, your needs first, creating boundaries, being in a place of abundance rather than being in a state of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. This is exactly what I needed when I was disconnected, stressed, anxious. I was so up in my head and just wasn't focusing on what was making me feel good, meeting my own needs and putting myself first. Yoga, meditation, breath work, mindset work, all of those things allowed me to reconnect back to my body and feel like my most confident self again, and actually gave me the ability to feel love, joy, excitement again. So if you'd like more information on the girls retreat online, then there's a link below where you can just drop your email address and I'll send you more information. If you do have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to drop me a DM or put them in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.